everybody. Welcome, welcome, and Happy New Year. So thankful to have you here with me today. We are celebrating with this lovely little cardinal, and we are going to need some supplies to get started. You can, of course, use what you have on hand, but right now what I have in front of me is I have some white in acrylic paint, some black acrylic paint, light blue, some silver metallic, and some red. And of course, to draw, we're going to need a piece of paper. I'm using a mixed media paper to draw the picture and paint today. And you want to have several sizes of brushes. I have a 1/2 inch round brush, an inch flat brush, and a thinner liner brush to work with today. So you want these three to kind of get the ball rolling with our lovely picture. And then of course, a cup of water. And if I can get a paper towel close by, so in case you have any kind of mistakes or any spills, you definitely want to have that close. So you can also use watercolors. This is an awesome picture to do that. And I have this printout of the sketch of what it's going to look like, just to give you like a better idea, because sometimes when I draw, the pencil is a little bit light. So I have this for reference, but we're going to get started. As you can see in our picture, we have several birch trees. So we have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 we're going to create. And that's just some simple lines going from the top of the page to the bottom of our page. So the first one's kind of hanging out up the page, and there we go. With our first line of 2024, we have our little birch tree beginning. So that's the first line. Then we want to create another, and it doesn't have to be perfectly straight. You actually want it a little bumpy, a little roly-poly, because birch trees, they're not perfectly straight in nature, right? And this next one's going to be about 2 inches wide. So the first one's about 1 inch or 1 finger length wide. The next tree is kind of 2 inches. And then this little guy, this little tree, is going to have a little branch kind of stemming off. So I'm just taking about halfway up 2 parallel lines and making myself a little branch. So we're getting started fairly quickly. It's coming together. We have our first tree here. We've created the second tree. And about halfway, we will have this little branch coming on where our lovely little cardinal will stand. Now, this little guy is pretty easy to draw. It's actually the hardest part of this whole project. But we have this little close-up of here of how we're going to do it. So we're going to start off creating a little bit of a triangle here. So I have my little bit of branch, and I'm going to come down here and make almost like a letter L that's kind of pointed up a little bit. So if you could see that, I made my letter L. It's kind of pointed parallel to the branch, and that's actually going to be the start of the bottom of my cardinal wing. So we just started off this little branch here, and we're creating this little L. The next step is to create this shape, which is kind of like an elongated kind of U. So if you can kind of draw a long U, we're going to start at the branch again and come down and kind of curve up and come back up for this U. And stop about there. So we don't really have a branch continuing. This is going to be where the body of our cardinal is. So I'm going to kind of match up here and make the other wing. So that's the bottom of my left cardinal wing. This is the bottom of the right. And that's just a little V shape right to the right of this little U tail that we created. And then we're going to kind of just bring that up and slowly sketch round to create the wing. So we're taking that line all the way up and kind of rounding him out here. And I'm stopping kind of where this tail starts to begin. So I'm lining up my pencil and I'm coming around and I'm stopping right where this tail kind of begins. And then I start going the opposite way and making it go towards the top. And it almost looks like a shark fin. So once you do that little curved piece, when you come to the top, you're going to come back down almost like a little shark fin. And then don't worry about the face just yet. We're going to kind of skip over and bring this wing up. So we have this little bottom part is going to kind of hop and skip over. And we're going to round out this front here. So now we brought this little wing up. And you can make adjustments to your cardinal. Their tail is kind of long. I just want to make it a little more proportionate. So I'm just going to make a little bit of an adjustment here. Just make it a little shorter. Like so. And then so we have this little L that kind of rounds up. And then we kind of move it to the top. So once we get to this point up here, we kind of stop and start going towards the top of the page. And then we come down almost like a shark's fin. And now we're going to focus on the little face of the cardinal right here. So we have our little face. It's going to softly sketch and come around. So it's almost like you're writing the letter J. So you come across here and you bring it down like the letter J and come up. And then we bring this little line down. Just like so. And then now we make a beak. So we just kind of point them out. You can turn your page and make a parentheses, but really it's just one curved line and the other curved line. Just adjusting my sketch. So that's basically this little part is our beak. It almost looks like a little clam, but that's just one parenthesis line, another one, and then one in the center to separate the beak. And then a little eye. To kind of finish off our cardinal like so. And that really is the hardest bit of all of the sketching. I'm just going to put a little line here. And we're going to continue with our tree work. So we have, like I said, this L, this other L. We rounded this front. We rounded towards the back. We created a little bit of like a shark fin. And then we drew a letter J, filled in with a little beak. And then we have our circle. And now we get back to the business of creating our birch tree. But as you can see in our inspiration, he's hanging on a branch. So we want to kind of bring this branch kind of through the other side. So if he's sitting here, I'm just going to give a little bit of a tail to that branch, just like so. And now back to birch tree business. So we have the cardinal kind of in front of this birch tree. So we're going to start drawing our lines and just creating the next tree. And this is going to be about another 2 fingers wide. And skip about 1 finger length and then do another 2. So we're going to skip about 1 finger length and then fill the tree for 2. So 2 fingers will give you your size of your birch tree. And just like so. Just bringing it down. So I have my 2 fingers. That's about how wide. And with some short strokes, bringing down this birch tree. And then last but not least, our last little side here is going to kind of hang off here. And about a little bit more than halfway, I'm going to add some interest and add another branch kind of hanging out that way. It's a little more than halfway down for my last tree. I'm going to throw a little branch that way. And there you have it. Our lovely little sketch, super easy, super simple. Don't worry if your cardinal is not right completely in the center of the page. You can have him a little higher or a little lower. And then just to have a little bit darker of a view of the sketch for the cardinal, which I said is probably the hardest bit of it all. You have that little bit of a J shape, and then you can turn your page this way and make 2 parentheses touching, and then kind of land that little mouth line down the middle. And so with these birch trees, we're going to, the page is white, well, we're still going to add some white to the page. But this is also a fun project to do on black paper, and you can let like the little black birch lines show through. So with the trees, we're going to get started in these little 1 finger wide background pieces. So you don't want to get confused between the background and the tree. And the way to do that is to kind of just softly mark at the top and the bottom where your background is going to be. So I'm just taking my pencil and just lightly putting a mark on where I'm going to be painting my background, because sometimes before you know it, you might be painting a tree section when it really should be for your background. So I'm just going top to bottom and lightly putting a pencil mark just to show which area has the background color. And the brush that we're going to get started with is this 1-inch flat brush that we have. And I've had it sitting in my water, so I'm going to take the excess off the side of my cup and kind of dry it off on my paper towel. And I have this nice like light blue, almost gray, wintry background. And for this technique, I'm going to be using this metallic silver just to add a little bit of shimmer, kind of give it like a kind of fancier effect. I'm going to add some of my silver, some of my blue, and they're going to kind of come together and make this nice wintry grayish blue for my background. And then when you look at your picture in the light, you'll get that little bit of a shimmer. So with that 1-inch brush, I'm mixing this gray. If you don't have a silver, you can just use some black and some white to create gray. And we're going to take our brush with that blue and silver mixture. Or if you don't have the blue and silver, you can do blue and gray. And same thing with your colored pencils. You can start off with a little bit of blue and then shade over with a little gray. And we're just going to stand our flat brush and kind of just bring down that background color, all just going up and down. You don't want to kind of fill in left to right. You want to kind of see the stroke of the back and forth. And don't worry if you kind of go over the drawn pencil line. That's totally okay. You just want a guideline to kind of see where your tree starts and stops. So if you go over, that's totally fine. And here we are. With the next background, so I'm looking and making sure I have my mark there and I'm not confusing it with my other tree, which is perfect. I'm going to get some more gray on my brush and then just move the color up and down, just like so. for the background or the part that's in between our birch trees. And the next one, again, moving this flat brush, kind of holding it perpendicular, not flat like this, but just swiping up and down, using my tree lines as a guide. And last but not least, my little piece on the edge here. And there you have a nice grayish wintry background. And we just want to enhance it a little bit with some winter white. So same brush, I'm gonna clean it out pretty good. I'm gonna dry it up on my paper towel like so. So you just see a little bit of these bristles coming through. So it's kind of making that kind of break apart. And I'm just gonna pull a little white off to the side and do a little tester stamp. And then just kind of softly just pull through some white on all my little background pieces. Just softly pulling a little bit of white. Maybe it's a wintry wind blowing through. Just giving that snow appeal. Just like so. And there you have our background. So we have that lightly dusted bit of white going just straight up and down. And now on to our birch trees. Now, for the most part, our birch trees are going to be white. So the page is white. You can just leave it white and then come in with some black. But I'm just going to kind of prime with this flat 1-inch brush. I'm just going to take a little bit of white and just kind of go over my trees, just so there's a little bit of paint on there, just to give it a little bit more coverage. So with that 1-inch brush, I'm just going into some white and just quickly going over my trees, not too worried about having lots of coverage. I just want it a little bit wet. And if you're working with something like colored pencils or watercolors, you can just skip this process and try to leave the page as white as possible, and then just come in with the black detail. But for the acrylic, I'm going to just enhance the white on the page a bit with a quick little brush of some watery white. Perfect. So now that we have our trees covered in some white, I'm going to use my liner brush. And this is going to be my new best friend. We're going to be doing a lot of pretty much outlining. And we're just going to start with the outside of the trees. Let that dry, do our cardinal, and then we'll come back to the birch details. So I just want to kind of define with some watered down black. I'm taking this brush and just softly kind of pulling the color down, and we're just outlining the edge of either side of the branch. So now we're just defining our tree a little more with a nice thin liner brush and just coming down. I'm trying to do it in multiple tries. I'm not trying to do it all in one shot. I just want to kind of darken the edge and just define the edge a little more. Just like so. And again, this is a liner brush mixed with some black and a little bit of water to help. And then I turn my brush to the side to kind of coax it into a point, just to leave it, give it more of a pointed feel, like you're working with a pen or a marker. But if you'd like to make a mixed media, you can always use a Sharpie, or you can always use a dark ink pen or black colored pencil to kind of use the same effect and outline your trees. And again, birch trees, they're not super straight. So if your line is bumpy and runny, don't be afraid. It adds to the style and it looks more natural that way. And so once we have our trees lined, we'll be doing multiple shades of red for our cardinal. So we'll have a brighter red for the majority of it, but then we want to add a little bit of a shadow. So the way that you create a shadow for the wings and the way that it's sitting, it just takes a very little bit of black to mix with the red. So once we finish lining this up, we'll be mixing our color. So you want to have the standard red that kind of comes out of the bottle, and then you want to have a little bit of a darker red just by simply mixing up a touch of black. So literally what I mean by a touch of something is that you are slightly touching with your brush the color that's more powerful and potent. Usually it's black, that or a darker shade that will kind of overpower whatever you're trying to mix with. So slowly start incorporating the color by touching the paint barely and using, you can always add more, just like cooking, right? You can always add more pigment. You can't take away. So you touch the paint, you move it into the red, and then you can start making it a shade darker so that you can create the shadow and define some details a little better. So with all that talk, let me show you what I mean. So I have this 1/2 inch round brush. I'm literally gonna dry it off a little bit and I'm gonna touch the black. So I touched a little bit of my black and then I'm gonna start pulling the color out. And as I'm kind of mixing and moving the color, it's still not dark enough. So again, I'm going to touch the black and keep pulling and trying to mix to create that shade. And then this is a little dark, so I'm just going to continue to add some red. And you kind of play with it and pull it till you see, okay, perfect, to have a nice shade. It's not too much darker. And so we have the original shade and now we have our shadow. So now that I have both my colors mixed, I'm going to start applying the color on here. And of course, with a larger shape, you use a larger brush. So I'm going to take my larger brush and just use the original red and just basically make my first layer onto the cardinal. So with the cardinal, it's a little tricky because you have this little piece of wing behind this tree. So you want to make sure you don't forget that part. So don't leave your wing behind. And don't worry about the direction too much in which you're painting. You can always go left to right, up and down, just like so. But you want to notice that if it has any kind of overlap, so you see a little bit of a shininess there, I'm going to use my brush to kind of start smoothing it out. You don't want to leave too many blobs. You want to definitely apply the paint, but then try to smooth out any of the shiny lines in between. It helps with drying time and it helps with making the picture look more smooth. So once you apply the paint, don't forget to see if there's any shininess to kind of just go back over it and smooth it out. And I'm not going to paint my face. Remember, our face in the inspiration, our cardinal's little face is a shade of black. So I'm just doing all these parts, the little wing and tail, in this original base red. And I already have my mixed shadow color ready to go. So I'm just filling in this base, coming around, getting that wing filled in now. Making sure my lines are smooth and that I'm spreading out the paint so it dries quickly. And now I'm just kind of doing the last bits here towards the bottom. I'm kind of taking the point and putting it towards the bottom. So the tail is going to have this kind of straight up and down movement. And that's the only area really that I want to kind of have this pulled kind of stroke going on. And at the bottom of this wing and this wing as well. And that's the only part that you really need to add a little bit of texture. And it'll be more noticeable once you add the shading and once you add the outline in black. So I have my liner brush again, my handy dandy liner brush. And this is just a little close-up of the base red we got going on. So it's really nice, but it is a little kind of bright on the background. So we want to kind of make it look a little natural. We have that already mixed red and black together. And now we're going to take our liner brush and go into that red and black mixture and do a little tracing. So as we come up here, I'm going to kind of fill in the shark fin a little bit. So I'm just kind of going close towards the edges that we drew. And I'm just coming around and I'm almost retracing the lines that we drew. So back in again to our darker shade, I'm just going very close to the lines that we drew, almost retracing. And now I'm going to do that same stroke. I'm pulling up this dark color. And now it's around the other side. Just kind of retracing my steps on the outside here. And pulling it up. And now the tail. Just kind of coming around. Pulling up. And then gonna round this part for his belly. Just like so. And you have a little line in the tail. Just like so. So we add a little texture here with a softness. And then we're basically just pulling up from the bottom. And kind of creating these darker little lines. So it kind of looks like his feathers. Just like so. And then a little rinse. And we'll fill in his face with a little bit of black. And make sure that you dry your brush. You don't want when you're lining it to be too drippy. And let's fill in his little face. So I'm just going around the eye. And pulling it in like so. And just getting that other side of the branch kind of lined up. I have this line here. And then we're going to, again, retrace our steps with this liner brush. So just similar to where we put the shadow, we're going to now create a thin line and actually give this bird an outline. So I'm softly pressing, and again, when I'm going into the black, I'm twisting my brush to a point, but you can just use a black colored pencil or Sharpie too to just trace the outline. And I bring the head to the point, and I'm putting my pinky too on the canvas just to give me more control. But I'm just putting a soft kind of black outline there. And then as I get to the bottom of my little feathers here, I want to draw some straight lines down. So as I come to the bottom of tracing my little feathers, I want to do some texture lines. So straight little lines down and a soft little line to define the wing here. And again, now with the tail, and again, some feathery lines at the bottom. Coming here. And this little side too gets a little feather treatment with some straight lines. And outlining the breast there. Like so. And that's how we have our little cardinal outlined. So the shadows are in place, and now we can add a little bit of highlight. So same liner brush is going to get some white, and I'm just going to come and leave some broken lines. So I'm barely touching the canvas, and I'm just highlighting certain little sections with some broken lines, barely touching, not being fancy at all, and just adding a little bit of highlight there, just like so. So just a little highlight kind of as you go down this one and you come up a little in the tail, just like so. And just gonna fill in the little beak here. With a little white in the red. Okay, so now the fun part begins. The fun part of creating the birch tree lines. So our cardinal is popping. He's the little guy hanging out in the forest. And we're going to bring to life his little tree friends. And the way you do it is very simple. You have the liner brush, and it's not very hard to create the birch trees, but you don't want very harsh lines. You want them kind of wispy, and you want them kind of rugged. And let me show you what I mean. So it's almost like a little bit of a dry brush, and definitely in short strokes. So the way that you create it is you're just literally going to swipe left to right. And you don't want to kind of go up and down like this too much. Just a little bit goes a long way. And you want to try to keep it kind of straight. So you don't want any kind of angled lines like that. You definitely want to keep your lines left to right. So don't angle them too much. I'm barely touching the paper, and I'm just swiping left to right, and you just really kind of alternate lines. And then if I want to add some detail, I just do one up and down and then back to some thicker lines left to right, smaller lines. So I'm just in the middle. And you can just get creative. And really, the only thing is you just want to keep it either a perpendicular or horizontal line. You definitely don't want any angled lines. So even in this branch here, it's up or down. There's no angled lines. And we're going to work this through the whole page. So just like Bob Ross says, happy little trees. We have happy little birch trees here who need little lines. Just like so. And you can group them in a thick fashion. You can leave them thin and long. You can have them alternating either side. You can get pretty creative. Just go with what you think looks cool. If you've ever seen a birch tree in real life, try to think about how they look to you. And you can also see from our inspiration here, you can have more of an idea of the different variations and how thick and thin you can create these lines. But what's important about that is that you don't need a lot of paint to make a big effect. So take your time, go left and right, have one or two little perpendicular lines here and there. But for the majority of everything, thin lines, a big group of thin lines, and just back and forth. And just like that, this forest really starts to take shape. Back and forth. And you can leave it with a very dry kind of pull back and forth, or you can have it very saturated. Both look good. You can do like small broken lines like that. Really practice your technique. Exactly. Happy little accidents, just like Bob Ross would say. You're so right, Jared. And as long as these accidents are left to right, our birch tree is happy. Our birch tree does not really do roller coaster lines. It's very simple, left to right or up and down. And sometimes less is more. And if you feel like, oh no, I put too much black, the best part about acrylics is it's very forgiving. So all you have to do is let your painting dry, and anything that you don't want to keep on your page, drying is always the best method to making it look different. So just step away, let it dry, and once it's dry, you can come back and kind of cover it up with a little white, and just take your time and start over. But as you do this, I want you to also think about the materials that you use. I have that silver kind of in my background, and as I'm going through, it's kind of finally drying, and you get this really pretty shimmer going on in the background. It almost looks like, you know, when you look at a snowflake or the snow, and then you just have that little twinkle kind of show, but just adds that little touch of creativity. So if you're looking to do mixed media, or if you'd like to paint with acrylics, trying out new paints is always fun, especially with a winter time. You can definitely use a silver to create a new kind of dimension to your painting. And same thing with my favorite way of working in mixed media. I would also do these lines with Sharpie, or you can do lines like this with colored pencil and sharpen the edges and the effect of these little black birch lines. So they also sell these really nice Posca paint pens that have the metallics. And so you can get as simple with just some simple crayons and pencil, or as fancy as you like, depending on the materials you use. And just last but not least, we have this little birch tree here. And then another cool thing that I would like to do with these type of designs is anything that has like a wintry or kind of snow effect. They also sell, which was really popular when I was younger, the puff paint. So when you put the puff paint, it stays very textured and puffy, and you can definitely use something like that to then put some snow on top and put little dots to kind of give your picture texture in that way. So just some creative ideas of when you're shopping or looking for materials. You can try new things like puffy paint or the paint markers like I was explaining, Sharpies or colored pencils, and kind of mix all those materials on one page. So even though this is a simple design, pretty fairly easy to do and straightforward, you can add interest again with all the materials you use. Lovely. So now my birch trees are resembling my inspiration ones. And if you can see, there's little dots of snow kind of peeking in the background. Some are gray, some are white. And my favorite way to do the dots is going to be creating a little bit of a gray, or using my silver on the side, but it's going to be using the opposite end of my brush. So this little point versus my liner is my best friend when making some snow. So I'm just going to dip it right into my white, and you can put snow on the birch trees too. It might not pop up, but if you have puff paint, that's a good time to use it because it'll pop up if you see it on the white of the birch tree because it's textured. But I'm really just going to concentrate on my background, loaded some paint on the opposite side of my brush, and now I'm just going to come in and in between just put some snow. And every so often, just do a dot here, a dot there. Some people also like to do the splatter method. So there's a couple of ways to do some snow. You can just do the single. Some people like to do groups of 3. And then, of course, the splatter method, if you take some watery acrylic paint and put it on a toothbrush or a paintbrush. I'm going to take some watery paint like so. And to have a more controlled effect, I put it on my thinner brush. And I'm going to tap. So softly tapping gives it a very controlled kind of splatter. And some people can use a toothbrush. Some people use a cotton swab. So you can use different methods to kind of achieve the same look. Oh, I added another polka dot to my shirt. Perfect. So I'm just going to continue with some bigger dots. You can try the splatter method, whatever you think looks more fun. And again, as I'm kind of looking through, you can kind of see the shimmer of that metallic mixed with the blue. And it's with these little details that you really tell a bigger, better story of your picture. So we could have just left it kind of blank and blah, but when you add that little bit of snow, just adds a little bit of magic and whimsy. So I hope you think about when you're creating something, is it really finished, or can I add something of my personality to it by adding some of this detail and just create that bit of magic that might not have been there before. That's why it's good to learn different techniques or different styles or use different materials and kind of explore what you like, what you don't like. And that's how you kind of develop your style. Lovely. Okay, so once that snow is done, we're going to come back into the areas of the bird with the liner brush and then just do a little bit more detail work with outlining his beak. So I'm back to my liner brush once all my little snow is done, and I'm trying to make sure that it's not watery at all because I just want to make sure he has a beak he can open. Right now his beak is kind of lonely, so I just want to outline it again and slowly create the line for his mouth and brighten up his eye with a little dot. And then just softly come in for a little more detail. Just another layer of now a darker bit of black, just to give it that really feathery look, like so. And then when you think that you're finished and ready to go, filling in all your birch trees. Just make sure that your details look good to you. Just want to make it a little darker on the edges of the trees here. But of course, with any finished work, if you can sign your name at the bottom right and you know you're completely done, then you're officially an artist. So bottom right, sign my name. And that's how I know my masterpiece is officially complete.